Bring it on back to 1941.
Franklin was press.
Depression's almost done.
But let's rewind.
See what we can find.
Get on that contextualization grind.
Treaty of Versailles. After World War I, countries upset and angry, reparations not fun. Roaring 20s ended with the crash of 29, and the dirty 30s started with economy decline, with the Hoovervilles rising, rugged individualism driving, people to the streets who aren't really thriving. So in comes FDR, the new candidate, the Democratic nominee for president. He's got these ideas with Congress on his side. Here comes a new deal. It renewed our sense of pride. Relief, recovery, reform, the 3 R's. WPA, Civilian Conservation Corps, created lots of jobs when the people needed more.
Germany, 1933. Adolf Hitler in this year, elected chancellor now we fear. Fascism Italy, Nazi Germany, Mussolini Hitler, Tojo, oh no.
Hitler wrote Mein Kampf in 1925, anti-Semitic values continued to thrive. Germany was gaining really extreme power, Britain was barely holding on in this dire hour. FDR and Congress are home and scared, don't want to be involved and have their men laid bare. For the first time they consider isolation, try to change to protect the nation. So in comes the Neutrality Acts of 39, but wait, he'll contradict and realign. Germany invades Poland in 1939, the European situation not exactly fine. GB declares war with Nazi Germany, France is in it too, there's really no harmony. September of the next year, 1940, the Axis forms of the world's worst enemy. Germany, Italy, and Japan, but of course the leader is the fatherland. Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands, attacked by Hitler's megalomaniac hands. The US is just there, watching the madness. FDR wants to support Britain to stop that bad
In 1940, he won his 3rd turn. Good president or not, his legacy would be heard. Sees his buzz struggling, their losses are doubling. Dying to send the British some ships. Total war? Let him throw in his chips. George Washington wouldn't love this interventionist approach, but FDR rallied the people to do the most. Against the Neutrality Act of 35, which said that into war, the U.S. would not dive. Opposition included Charles Lindbergh. He made a committee that put America first. But others believed that the war was in need in order to achieve democracy and get those double Vs.
And that brings us back to the actual speech. FDR lists the 4 things to be free. The speech was a State of the Union address. When the press has ideas that he wants to express, the Constitution recommends it, heck yes. FDR opens his speech by setting the scene, saying that till this point, no foreign power had been mean. No country had constituted a threat up until this point yet. He goes on to describe how dictator regimes are posing a risk to the world as it seems. He says that this particular SOTUS address is special because our borders can be transgressed. Through Latin America, it's a mess. He describes our country's national policies.
He knows that Americans want these policies to be worldwide fast so we can all agree and have right issues to be resolved speedily. He says that today's best is not good enough for tomorrow. Oh man, ain't that pretty rough. Tells his people that the U.S. made progress with the Army. They've developed it a lot in addition to the Navy, but FDR isn't quite satisfied yet. His peacetime nation is under a threat. He recognizes difficulties preparing for war. After all, his nation was at peace just before, so he brings up Congress and begins to implore. He needs funding and resources to help some other nations. He won't give in cash, he'll just give in munitions. They will pay us back in weapons, which will help us later. It's like an investment, which can only make us greater. Gotta prep now for the future safety. Then lacing with munitions is what he thinks is the key. He outlines what a true democracy should look like, including jobs, opportunities, equality, security, civil rights for all, no special privileges, a rising standard of living for all American villages. To ensure that these policies stay for many generations, he lists these 4 freedoms to set some foundations for how people in America should ideally be living, and that the government to its people should always be giving.
Now let's jump into the freedoms and what they represent and how they will impact the people to the fullest extent.
First is freedom of speech and expression.
The right to articulate ideas and opinions without the fear of oppression by government minions, also known as the First Amendment in the Constitution, impacting each court case's final resolutions. The struggle to achieve freedom of speech and expression is still shown in modern-day sessions of political injustice and biased oppression, but we are working towards it now. For instance, look at how we are allowed to speak our minds about issues that impact humankind. However, not all countries have this right. Places like North Korea continue to fight. Freedom of speech and expression is possible to achieve, but the people of North Korea are forced to grieve. The second freedom has been fought since the start of time, all the way from the era of the colony's prime. From the Act of Toleration to Rhode Island's accepting station, the freedom to worship God, past generations give a nod.
The second is freedom of every person to worship God in his own way.
Now, Puritans and Protestants can live together in peace, along with Jews, Muslims, and atheists at the least, for religious oppression will soon begin to cease, with the freedom to worship God however one may please. However, the struggle in America still remains. Terrorism has caused anti-Muslim sentiment to reign. Bans on Muslim immigration came with an executive order. They claimed it was just protection, but against religion they closed the border. The struggle for this right is still a process, but is a standard thanks office. The third freedom raises the standard of living, securing economic understandings for the people to keep giving.
The third is freedom from want.
Freedom from want. Freedom from want. Now, what does that mean? It is the freedom for economic stability and a fulfilled routine, granting every person the things that put them in a pleasant mood, try a house, some clothes, and a whole lot of food. Many thought this was controversial and communist to do every day. Don't worry, said FDR. It's not in a communist way, but a government providing for the people with the freedoms they say. Even today, in other countries, this issue is hard to beat, but groups like Habitat for Humanity help the homeless back to their feet. The final freedom's the least scary of them all, unless it doesn't pan out. Then the world might start a brawl.
The fourth is freedom from fear.
The freedom from fear is the one all Americans hear during the start of the speech when he explains a dictatorship reach. Freedom from fear shuts the door that could open the possibility of war. After all, what kind of life's worth being long if you're always afraid of being bombed? At the time of the address, FDR was in a battle of chess. He was trying to get the nation to invest in war. However, isolationism was there at the country's core. The conflict with Germany was growing every day, while the red of democracy was going astray. Anti-Semitic values were on the rise, and the Axis powers had continued to thrive.
In the mind of FDR, the United States had a choice, and in joining war, the U.S. had a voice. One against democracy and treason, but he couldn't jump into war without a reason. Instead, he spoke about what Americans needed. Even during war, the four freedoms should never be unheeded. They granted solid basic rights to every American, black or white. A speech like this should not be dismissed. To talk to his people, FDR was not remiss. Like most of his other policy addresses, he worked with advisors to help him have successes. Who did he choose? Let's break down some guesses. Harry L. Hopkins, Adolph A. Burrell, Samuel I. Rosenman, and Robert Sherwood took a whirl. Others were included, like Benjamin V. Cohen, but like his other speeches, FDR's big brain was a showin'. He did lots of editing and heavy rearranging, 7 darn drafts. The speech did lots of changing. In fact, it took until the 4th draft to add the 4 freedoms. Doesn't that make you laugh? It happened one night with FDR and his buds. It was his ideas for peronation. Ain't he a stud? Rosenman recounts of that fateful night. They waited as he leaned far back in his swivel chair. It must have given them a fright. With his gaze on the ceiling, he took a long pause, and then he leaned forward and dictated the new clause.
And despite it being way far back, the Enlightenment years, FDR's speech grabbed concepts from John Locke's prospects for a better society to bring variety to a 17th century of notoriety, but it was a rebirth of philosophy, honestly, the first to mention rights to life, health, liberty, and possession. Remember? Not secession.
In order to persuade Americans about the speech, he used differing rhetorical strategies for its impact to increase. His purpose was to inform the masses that the European situation should not be looked at with rose-colored glasses, and to gain support for the intervention abroad, or else their own democracy would be at risk for fraud. Finally, he tries to gain support for the Lend-Lease program that involved weapon export.
Now let's take a look at which methods he used. We'll take it slow so your brain won't feel abused. The speech starts with a charged and angry tone in order to get the people in a serious zone. When he speaks of national security and threats, he sets the stage for his important intents. His urgent diction raises alarm with words like unprecedented and threat supporting firearms. Now that the audience is listening and alert, FDR utilizes emotion to get them hurt. Now don't worry, it's not actual danger, but the usage of emotional examples will be a changer. FDR speaks of what could occur if democracy is not ensured. This is emotional because it affects everyone, and it is a scary reality to have begun. His emotional examples of nationalism discuss our future and past to show unity in American values for the people at last. He makes sure to speak to the heart of American pride by using pronouns that make you look inside. We, our, together, us, connects FDR to the American people so they can discuss. Now that they are similar and are united as one, the president and the people have the same purpose for what needs to be done. Now that the people feel connected to the president, they're inclined to listen to his ideas and follow his set precedent. Especially since everyone is connected through pride, American nationalism has reached its stride. But don't worry, he does more. He gives the audience logical reasoning and ideas to explore. The ideas talk about what democracy will ensure if it established in the U.S. furthermore. He persuades people on what the value of these thoughts by telling them what life could be like if we take our shot of achieving democracy and rights so that we could have a country of peace and quiet nights. His rhetorical strategies show politics and power, as the president could influence the people by the hour. Depending on what skills he stated, his impact would be heavily weighted.
The 4 Freedom speech was not a huge hit, and the American people did not find it lit. It wasn't until painter Norman Rockwell made 4 oil paintings that put the nation under a spell. There was one for each freedom. Isn't that swell? FDR hired him to do it. Wasn't that smart? One of the nation's top magazines caught wind of the art. The Saturday Evening's Post publication spoke to the heart. Seen by millions now, the art reminded people of how democracy influenced their lives. And wow, the speech became a cash cow. This form of visual rhetoric didn't suck. Raised $133 million. The Army budget folks couldn't believe their luck. Now that they raised more money, we wouldn't be sitting ducks. This shows culture and society because magazines were growing in variety. Had mass printed media not been so popular at the time, nothing would have happened. The speech would not be seen as prime. The 4 Freedoms set a huge expectation for what the American people should expect from the nation. Now the speech itself had to persuade because the impact of the 4 Freedoms would be heavily weighed.
Symbols. Signals that our country would resemble the greatest of ideas that would make the East tremble. In FDR's speech, he introduced the Lend-Lease policy, which would help the Allies out, give them some ships and munition, put them on the route to victory.
Entrance into World War II only 11 months later, 4 Freedoms set the president up to succeed as an activist post-Pearl Harbor. He would represent the need to be a superpower, not let the world go sour. This connects to America in the world, the theme that shows how our relations unfurled. FDR wants to get involved abroad, change the U.S. from isolationist to interventionist. Let's be odd. Churchill, FDR banded together, won the World War, and fought to keep the peace. The Atlantic Charter helped the Allies out to keep world's peace in the post-war world. People looked to FDR. It changed to the influence of the press for years to come. He was an icon.
The 4 Freedoms would serve as a beacon for the lost, for the dying, for the frightened, for the grieving. The set up the basis, the sites, Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Eleanor Roosevelt, his activist wife, helped create the UN in honor of his life, but her most impressive, recognized approach was her contribution to ending persecution. People say that FDR's Sodas of 41 changed American national identity. Interventionism had won. FDR's words laid the groundwork for modern American beliefs, pushing the movement for civil rights. That's pretty neat. To sum it all up, war was raging in Europe. FDR had to make it clear that U.S. interests could no longer just be here. To fight for democracy, they had to help abroad, and for his For Freedom speech, we should all applaud.